So just to introduce myself, I was founder and CEO of Six Start for 17 years until earlier this year. We're probably best known for making a game called Zombies Run, which is a smartphone game where you put on your phones, you run outside in the real world with your legs and your body, not on the sofa, and you run to go and escape zombies in this kind of audio apocalypse. And we had 10 million players. It was a pretty big thing. It went on to spin off sorts of different things like Marvel Move, which launched a couple of years ago. Before all of this, I cut my teeth in the world of alternate reality games. So I made a game called Perplexity, which was a worldwide treasure hunt with £100,000 buried somewhere. We had helicopters. Everyone has helicopters these days, but back then it was cool. And we had this puzzle called Finding Satoshi, where basically we printed the photo of someone's face on one of our puzzle cards, and you had to find this person, and it took about 20 years? I don't know. It took a long time, and long after we stopped making the game, and there was an NHK documentary narrated by Willem Dafoe about this puzzle. So I've made some things. These days I write books. This is a book that I wrote in English, not in Italian. It got translated to Italian. This is a better cover than the English one. It's called You've Been Played, about why gamification is bad. I'm writing a new book about the rise and the history of immersive art and immersive entertainment. The focus of the book is just as much about the last few centuries of what we might call immersive stuff. I know everyone hates the word immersive, but bear with me. Pageants and royal tournaments and panoramas, and how that kind of links, maybe not directly, to immersive experiences and immersive theater today. For this book, I talked to a lot of people far smarter than myself, from usual suspects like Punch Drunk and Disney, but also Meow Wolf and Team Lab and Dolby and games developers and things like that. The field is almost too big, really, to think about trends and traps and opportunities that make sense to people who are making immersive art exhibitions or LARPing or escape rooms or video games. So, if you're listening to something and you think, yeah, everyone knows that, then sorry, not everyone does know that. But I do hope that you'll find some things that are useful. Some of these things are based on hard data. Some of them are basically hunches or predictions. But that makes it more fun. So anyway, I'm going to get going. Trends. A big thing that I kept hearing from people I talked to across all sorts of different fields was the issue of onboarding and training. I realize I call it like player onboarding. That's probably not really correct. Everyone is experimenting with this because as people are interested in more deeper and more complex and more interactive experiences, you need to kind of train audiences and like how to do things. So for an example, at Omega Mart in Las Vegas, Meow Wolf's recent kind of immersive art installation, they have this thing called Boop cards. And these are like cards with RFID tags in them. And you can go and tap them to terminals, and that will sort of like log you in to different computer stations, and it provides a kind of gamified experience across their installation. So it provides a bit of structure to what is otherwise maybe for some people a pretty overwhelming experience of just like lights and colors and story and interaction everywhere. Now, the interesting thing is I thought these cards were for returning visitors, because everyone just wants people to come back. So I thought people would go to Meow Wolf and wander around and be like, that's cool, and they come back again, they buy one of these cards, which is like $3, it costs nothing, and then get the deeper story. But it turns out that's not true. They made these cards as onboarding for new people who maybe didn't know what to do. And it provided more structure for people to like, say, what do I do next? I'm going to do what the card tells me to, what the game tells me to. One of the things I found is people kind of fixate on the gamification too much. So maybe they actually stop looking like at the environmental art and they just think about, what's my next objective? So the short story is, they're still trying to figure out what to do about this. This is still an experiment for them, and the gamification is not quite all there yet. Video games are really the entertainment that's kind of figured out the art of onboarding. So if there's anything that we kind of want to learn from there in terms of tutorial or like layering on skills, that's probably the place to go. Next, widening skill and training requirements. This is kind of a slightly complicated one, why I put it at the start. But people might be familiar with the idea of Jubentia, these sort of Chinese murder mysteries. So the idea is you get a group of like 8 people or 10 people sitting around the table, and they get a little booklet, each giving them a role. So you are, a doctor with a sordid past, and you are, actually secretly the killer, but don't tell anyone. And over the next, hour or two, you play out this murder mystery, and people kind of accuse each other, a bit like in Werewolf, a bit like in LARPing, but with more of a story. And what's unusual about Jubentia is that people get these booklets, and they might spend like half an hour, just like reading them before you start playing them, which I think to a lot of people outside of China just seems like mind-bogglingly impossible. Like, how could you get anyone to come to your escape room or to come to your experience and just sit down and read like a book for like an hour before they get to do anything? And they can't pretend to read it. You have to read it to play your character, right? And so, but this Jubentia became like kind of like the most popular form of entertainment for young Chinese people for like a few years. I mean, millions and millions of people playing them. I'm not saying that this is like all entertainment will become this sort of like hard to get into. It's more like you can actually get people to invest this amount of time and preparation if they think it's worth it. Of course, this is not unusual. If you've been to Simon Brin's talk earlier today, you'll have heard about workshops at LARPs, which can sometimes take as long as a LARP itself. So if you've got like a multi-day LARP, you might be in a workshop preparing you to, understand how to kind of role play for like 8 hours before that. I mean, really sort of intense levels of training to sort of learn about safety techniques and meta techniques and things like that. And I think for people like outside of the LARP world, it just sounds like this is just absolutely inapplicable and like impossible for any kind of commercial setting, right? So I get that. I suppose what I would say is that maybe it's worth seeing it as a kind of replacement for the sort of knowledge that people come into things like Harry Potter or Star Wars with. Someone goes to a Star Wars experience or a Harry Potter experience, they've already read like 50 hours of books, right? They know about this world. So if you're trying to boot someone up into your world, into your sci-fi world or fantasy world, like either you do that all diegetically, which is kind of difficult, or you go and get people to do some stuff beforehand. If you can make that interesting, that's kind of that's sort of the way to go. Of course, the idea of asking more of players is not universal. I mentioned this idea to some people who've made immersive theater in America, and they reacted like I'd sort of killed their mother. Just like the idea of asking the audience to do anything whatsoever was just like horrific. And the words they used was, "We meet the audience where they are." Also, like a totally valid way of doing things. That makes sense. All I would say is I think the demands on audiences, it seems in some areas it's actually increasing, and you can get away with more. Just speaking of like non-diegetic storytelling, I am kind of seeing that, like we're seeing that sort of expand a bit more in experiences of all kinds. I mean, an example of that might be something like War of the Worlds, if people have been to that. It's just very interesting, like how the story is told through the music and the lyrics. You kind of get away with more if you do that sort of thing. But also, there's one of my favorite escape rooms. They might be here, Case Closed in Edinburgh. They use flashbacks and kind of like and sort of intermissions for non-diegetic storytelling. It just means that you can start doing more complex kinds of storytelling in a way that wouldn't really make sense if you were trying to make it all believable. I kind of feel like a lot of experiences are so good at in-universe diegetic storytelling that they kind of neglect the way of doing it otherwise. Something that Disney is quite good at. If you go to a Disney ride, it's not all diegetic. The waiting area is obviously not actually real. It's a kind of blend of the real and the unreal. It's themed. It's got the right colors, it's got the right characters, but it's not actually in the universe. We started doing this for Zombies Run, actually, where we just found that people were just confused about how it worked, and we just added a 30-second or 1 minute kind of non-diegetic thing at the start that was themed. Immersive experiences as fan meeting points. So this is kind of people not necessarily looking for narrative or agency even, but just being around other fans. So like Netflix House, people have probably heard about this. Netflix are building their own experience spaces in disused malls. And this is also kind of connected to Book Talk. Secret Cinema would be a good example of this sort of thing, where you're just a fan of Blade Runner. You don't want to be Deckard. You don't want to be these people. You just want to dress up and be in that universe, right? And so that's different. People are not necessarily looking for agency or interaction there. That seems to be increasing. Book Talk, romantasy, everyone's into that sort of thing. Bridgerton balls. Just different expectations of what people want there. And it's not LARPing, but it's not LARPing. Swift, yeah, I went to the Swift series too. It's amazing, very expensive. But people were dressed up, it is interesting to see that as a kind of immersive experience. I don't mean the concert itself, I mean everything around the concert before people get there. People are kind of swapping their bracelets, people are dressed up incredibly well, people have been excited about it, going to it. It's a communal kind of aspect to it. There's no story, or maybe there is, but it's something that is a place where people can inhabit being a fan. The destruction of cringe. This is just a kind of interesting thing from Hawkeye, the TV show. Not the world's best TV show, I think, but it's fine, by Marvel Studios. There's a bit where Hawkeye, one of the lesser Avengers, goes to track down some criminal or whatever, get some clue, and he does a LARP. And it would be very easy. I think 10 years ago, 20 years ago, it would be very easy for this to just be done for laughs and look at these sad people, whatever. And it's very sweet. It's very respectful. They look like fun people to be around with. It is a boffer LARP, so it is people hitting each other with swords. So you can't get everything. But the point is that it's less embarrassing. It's more socially acceptable, I think, for people to be doing cosplay. Again, it's not news to anyone who's been watching this, but I think for me, I've noticed a different change in the understanding of kind of LARPing from being something that kind of seems, people are curious. I'm not saying they're really excited about that, but they're much more curious and interested in trying it out. I'd certainly say that LARPs have become indestructible in terms of earnestness. People cannot be embarrassed out of doing LARPs anymore. And it's become just a very common word to use now. Roleplay. Growing interest in roleplay. I know this is kind of contentious because I think a lot of people in the industry think that most people don't want to roleplay. Right? It's a niche interest, which is fair. I think it is actually a niche interest for most people. However, Dungeons & Dragons, it's hard to overestimate how important things like Dungeons & Dragons actual plays have been on the wider Dungeons & Dragons and tabletop role-playing industry. So actual plays, if you don't know what these are podcasts or YouTube's videos where people will basically play real Dungeons & Dragons, they're rolling the dice, And what this does, when you get comedians doing it or just funny, charismatic people doing it, not only is it entertaining, but it teaches people how to play Dungeons & Dragons and how to role-play. Right? How do you do this? People don't necessarily know how to do that. Roblox is a very different thing. The biggest genre of game in the top 50 games of Roblox is city role-playing. It's not the same as LARPing or whatever, but it is people basically, it's kids. The kids are playing, being policemen or being, shopping assistants or whatever in Roblox. You've probably seen some of these things, but Ryanair does a Roblox game. That's a bit role-playing. Why? I don't know. Increased desire for self-expression, herd competence, whatever. LARPers. New LARPers want control So it's not all well as well in the LARPing world. So here's an example from a talk that I think is like worth checking out. It's called "The Full House Trumps the Dance Card." Basically, some people are coming into LARPs and they have already planned out like their entire day, which is meant to be kind of like you're meant to be like open to opportunities in a LARP. You know, you're meant to be like, oh, I might go and meet someone interesting, or like some interesting thing might happen in the story. And some new players are coming in, and maybe they're a little bit nervous, you know, about what to expect, or they want to go and play with their friends. And so they've actually already like planned out like everything that's going to happen, not just in meetings, but actually the storylines. So they might go and say on Discord, you know, in a chat room, you know, before the LARP happens, they might say, okay, I want to have a storyline where my character, you know, confesses a secret to their brother. Who will do that with me, right? And so that's different to the way in which a lot of older LARPers, you know, view their hobby, which is a place to sort of to expect the unpredictable. Obviously, planning means that you have a kind of base level of quality. I think maybe people are coming with expectations from D&D and video games, where, of course, you can really control your experience. But I would say more experienced designers and players are not happy about this. What's this? Rising bar for visual immersion. I don't know. It's pretty obvious. People are going to the sphere. It looks amazing. We're not building a sphere here, obviously, but it's going to like Saudi Arabia or something. Outside of the sphere, we have IMAX now accounting for 6% of the US box office in first quarter 2024. People just want more from their cinemas. You know, they want bigger field of view. They want higher resolution. This is the way that cinemas are going. People don't want to just go and see a normal movie that they can see at home on their 4K TV. If they're going to go somewhere, they want it to be like really extraordinary. 4DX is obviously growing screens and films. 4DX just sounds crazy to me, but people like it. Seeing a shift towards LED screens in your sort of like places that might have otherwise used projectors to project stuff on walls are now using LED screens instead. So if you look at this picture, you've got projectors on the ceiling, projecting down on the floor, but those walls, there's no projectors, those are just massive like screens. Very high resolution, they're not high resolution actually, they're quite low resolution, but they're very bright, and they've got incredible contrast. And so when you're in there, it looks amazing. If you go and walk up to the screen, you can see the pixels, so not as good there, but it means there's no shadows. These are more expensive than projectors. They put out a lot of heat, but they look better. And it's probably going to be a bit of a technological arms race. But one of the interesting things that I saw, I went to interview TeamLab recently. The problem with a technological arms race, it just means that whoever's got the most money wins. TeamLab has a lot of money, but they don't have unlimited money. So they're sort of going to like an interesting thing where they're basically using like older technology, so just like motion control cameras, to do something like, well, how can we do something interesting and different that is conceptually difficult but maybe cheaper to make, right? And so this was just I've never seen anything like this before, this kind of like massive, you're actually inside this corridor. It looks like people are just looking at the screen, but you're kind of inside it. Really, really extraordinary. Museums are adding immersive entertainment, more so outside of this country and in countries where they have more money to give their museums. In Korea, I was at this the Jeongju National Museum, so pretty important museum, and they all have these immersive digital galleries now. And this was like meant to be an educational video about the casting of an ancient bell, and it just looks like Iron Man or something. And like so, it's like 70% entertainment and 30% educational. And people spend way more time in these spaces than they do in the rest of the museum. You kind of think maybe you should just make the entire museum out of this, or maybe that would be a bad idea. These are usually like wordless. Like there's no like text. There's no spoken audio, so they're very much made for an international audience, which kind of works pretty well. The production quality is like really good, like really, really good. And I'm sort of really curious where that's going. Nintendo museum, they call it a museum. It's not really a museum. It's more like a immersive experience theme park thing. Galleries are focusing more on installation art and environmental art. Of course, installation art is not new, but I think galleries and museums are very nervous about their patrons and their visitors being pulled away by your immersive Van Goghs and the rest, so we'll just do that ourselves. That's a tricky place to be, because if they're just going to do the same thing as everyone else, why do we need them? So there's going to be a bit of a push and pull there. This was an interesting one. Amos Rex in Helsinki. Of course, they're doing like a LARP in the museum. So we're seeing more museums just experimenting with entertainment and with like interaction. It's all happening while museums and galleries are kind of losing the cultural and popular power that they had before. I think also, like, here's my sort of take, is that I think education, people are like more interested in understanding other people's point of view rather than necessarily like objects. And I think that is actually something where like immersive experiences can do something that other forms can't through role play and through sort of inhabiting other places. Here's a hot take, over-tourism and climate change are leading to kind of recreations. And so I went to Venice for the Biennale recently, and you have to pay to go to Venice in certain times now. It's like a theme park, but even more so. You have these like cities which are almost becoming like immersive ticketed destinations, which I'm sure they would like find horrible that I'm saying that, but like if you look at the way in which people describe going to Venice or going to Florence or going to Paris, the itinerary and the level of control that people have over their experience through the internet, through apps, is kind of like going to Disneyland. I mean, people can know exactly what they're going to get, and they're spending that amount of money, and sort of getting consistency and quality. And from a social media point of view, tourism and immersive experiences kind of look the same, on TikTok and on Instagram. So, one of the most fascinating things I found during the research was sort of stumbled across this place in Marseille called Cosquer Mediterranean. Basically, there's this cave with Paleolithic art from many tens of thousands of years ago near Marseille, and it is being flooded because of climate change and rising sea levels. So it will be destroyed soon. You can't go in there, but it has amazing art. And so what they've done, like other caves in France, is they've made just an incredibly detailed replica of it. And instead of people walking through the replica, and spending 3 minutes in there and just blasting past and trying to look over each other's shoulders, they just turned it into a dark ride. It's a trackless dark ride, like you would have in newer sort of Disneyland experiences, and it's 40 minutes long. Like, I've never been on a dark ride that's 40 minutes long. And by being able to control people's like direction and gaze, it actually is, I think it's better than being able to look through it. Like, it's a better experience, which sounds like almost dystopian, but like for that sort of thing, where like either you have people just sitting there all day, or you have people just like kids just blasting through in like 30 seconds, like they're able to tell a kind of more interesting story. People really like this, and I would not be surprised if we see more of this. So what is this? Is this like entertainment? Is this education? On a completely different angle, video games. I'll reveal why this is kind of interesting in a minute. Live service and backlist games are retaining too well. So live service game is a video game where it keeps on being updated all the time. So something like Fortnite, something like Roblox, kind of, Minecraft, these sort of games where it's not you buy it once, you just play these games forever. So here's a graph of cumulative new game releases by year. You probably can't read this, but the point is this is now 80,000 games that you can buy and play on Steam, which is just a phenomenal number of games. It used to be that you would not be able to play a game that was released 10 years ago. Like, it would not work on the console that you had. It would not be updated. It would not be backwards compatible, but that's changing now. All of that means that when you release a new game now, you're not competing against games released this year or last year or the year before. You're competing against games from the last 20 years. And some of those games are being updated and have massive fan bases to the point where they're better than your game, even technically speaking. People are getting very concerned about this. Anyone who's interested in making new games is very concerned about this in the industry. This is a good meme. The entire games industry spends a decade making live service games. The best ones retain players forever. So players will never leave the old games. So players will never leave the old games. It just means, does this mean that people just play Fortnite forever? Does this mean that people play Roblox forever and they will never play new games? This is less of a problem for physical immersive experiences, because what we do tends to be a bit more ephemeral. But as experiences become more replicable, maybe people will just go to sleep no more forever. That's the hellish future. No one will go to any other immersive theater. Divergent AI experimentation, of course, I have to mention AI. People are sort of exploring AI in different ways. I talked to John Peterson, who's probably the smartest person writing about Dungeons & Dragons and tabletop role-playing at the moment. He's also a programmer, and his take is that large language models, AI, they're best for listening and extracting meaning. So he wants to see, and he's actually developing, I think, like an AI agent that will listen to Dungeons & Dragons games and basically sort of be a co-pilot to the referee or to the games master. So the games master might just go and ask us, okay, like how many goblins did they kill this session? What is the dice roll they need to go and get to go and defeat this enemy? And the AI will be able to go and tell this person automatically, which it doesn't replace the games master, it doesn't replace the referee, it just makes the job a lot easier. It makes it more easy for onboarding. The state of the art for AI transcription is very good. There's still some problems to be solved for speaker diarization, so AI is not very good at telling two different voices apart. But as long as you're not using it for mission-critical applications, it's kind of okay. So that's pretty good for Dungeons & Dragons, because referees always just make things up or help their players along. So less so about trying to replace humans and more trying to help humans. This was a really interesting demo, which basically, there's this guy, Simon Willison, who's doing some really interesting stuff with AI. He basically took a screen capture of scrolling through his Gmail, because he was wanting to go and get all the dollar values from his receipts. He just dumped that into Google and said, extract all the information, and they did it for free. The point being that you could probably go and take a video or real-time feed of just someone doing an escape room or someone going through an environment and have essentially a no-code solution and just say, okay, tell me how many times this person walks into the square. You don't need to go and get a software developer to do that. You might just be able to go and hook up the video feed to Google or to ChatGPT, and it will do it automatically without having a lot of work there. Traps. Speaking of technology, bespoke technology is hard. I think we especially for increasing the interactive experiences, they're increasingly reliant on software. The only worst thing than doing software is doing games. We sell games, experimental rocket launchers at Jupiter, to our players as if they were the most commonplace of endeavors. Fine print, it bursts into flames most of the time. Anyone who has used technology or custom software in their experiences will know just how expensive this is and how difficult this is to test, because you're trying to do something new each time. I think it's interesting how something like Bridge Command, which I think is very enjoyable, please try it out, and also the Odysseus 2024 LARP, which is based on Battlestar Galactica, both use the same open source engine, which is called Empty Epsilon, which is a sort of Star Trek Bridge Command simulator. And so it would be nice if people joined forces and developed more open source software or more systems that could sort of lessen the load. Because these experiences are very different. Bridge Command is not competing with this LARP, but they are using the same technology. Increased scrutiny and expectations. People are expecting experiences to be kind of like anything other than what you advertise them as. So, I've seen certain YouTubers and influencers go to experiences or theme parks and expect them to be like video games or massively multiplayer online games, despite that being functionally impossible and probably not a very good experience, even if you could do that. We have this vagueness of the term immersive. Everyone tells me it's a good marketing experience, but no one really loves it. People have come to interactive experiences expecting to LARP. People have gone to LARPs and expecting it to be like an escape room or whatever. Like everyone's just expecting different things. What's the solution? Better disclosure. If you go and try and buy a ticket for Viola's Room, then it will say there's no actors and there's no jump scares. Do people read websites? Probably not. So maybe that's not a great solution. I think early access, again, I come back to video games. The industry is making all the money in the world. Early access is a good way of basically taking money from people, but saying, this is really absolutely in development, right? This is like a beta, okay? So you can pay us money, maybe it's a little bit less, but you are not allowed to review it. Or you can review it, you just look like an asshole, basically. So, extended previews, that's what we would call them. But it's a kind of like an in-between thing. Games that are in early access on Steam, they're streamed. People get excited about them. Millions of people buy them, but they are amazingly treated differently and treated more leniently than finished games, which sounds weird, but there you go. Lack of cross-industry awareness. I've found in the people who I've spoken to, even people who you would think would know everything about what's going on, they're kind of unaware of what's happening in different or even similar areas. Not many immersive theater people have done LARPing, not many LARPing people have done immersive theater, all this sort of thing. To some extent, this is okay, because audiences don't know anything either. So, but it can't really continue, because people are going to, knowledge is getting better. We just keep on repeating the same mistakes. It's not a great thing for the industry. For example, I keep on seeing people on their websites or interviewers saying, our thing is the most immersive thing ever. I've never seen anyone do something as interactive, as our experience. Right, that's marketing, I get it, but you can't believe your own hype. If you think that what you've done, has never been done before, then you will think you cannot learn from anyone, right? Which is not true. You can learn from other people. And you usually are not in this direct competition. There's a real sort of ahistoricism, I think, in the immersive industry. I was told not to be critical here. I'm being critical of everyone. There's a real sort of ahistoricism in the immersive industry where people just have forgotten about all these things that came before. I will just note that games and movies do not see a need to go and say that they are good because of technical innovations, right? Avatar, yeah, you can let James Cameron say that, but most people do not have to go and say that. They say, we're a really good story, we're a really good thriller, we're doing this story in a different way. We're the first people to do that, but I think that it would be a good thing if the industry got a little bit away from being the biggest or the best or superlatives. Everyone's affected by this. I found it incredibly difficult to find out any information about Juventure. I've offered to pay Chinese academics, and they will not reply to my emails. Maybe I'm being rude or something. I don't know. There's just a lot of cool stuff happening, and we just don't know about them because it's not been translated, or we don't. This stuff is not being documented. People will put on immersive theater show, and they won't remember to go and do a walkthrough video, that gets preserved at the end. We just got to document this stuff better. I'm going to come back to this, so the hectoring is not ended. Increasing costs. There's a bit of a race towards higher degrees of physical immersion, which is very expensive. Obviously, everyone in the world complains about rent, but maybe not one country. I'll come back to them later. So smaller spaces, if you've been to Punch Drunk's latest thing, can't help but think maybe they're wanting to move that to other places and, malls and things like that. Requires less space. No one appears to be making real money. That's what people tell me in private. But everyone is trying. Everyone is trying to make money, but no one's making a lot of money. Team Lab, they look like they're doing well, but they make all their money from their solutions sector. It's not from tickets. The guy basically told me, we lose money on our unbelievably popular, immersive art exhibitions. So consultancy, that's what they do. Of course, we heard today from Swamp Motel, from other companies that are doing, brand experiences, consultancy. It provides a pretty sort of a better, more kind of even cash flow. But having done this myself at my company, where we were making our own games and also doing consultancy, keeping balance is hard. Often what happens is that you kind of, one thing ends up taking over than the other. If you've seen the movie The Substance, you know that's difficult. Membership plans and subscriptions. Some people are doing some really interesting experimentations with that. Subscriptions, good way of making money. Dropping out of the realism race, also good idea. In the West, people just seem like very interested in highly illusionistic reproductions of interiors. If you don't know what that means, then you just it's just normal. But if you go to other countries, they're not really interested in necessarily making the interior of a room look perfectly the same as that. Can you make something that feels immersive without it looking immersive? Oh yeah, finally, continued dilution of the term immersive. That's bad. I liked Tom Black's way of putting it when I talked to him at Bridge Command. Often when we say immersive, what we really mean is theming. And if you go to a bar where the barman is wearing a different hat, that's not immersive. That's just theming. And so that's just education that we need to do there. Opportunities. Sounds weird in light of recent events, but I think that there is actually increased appetite for blockbuster experiences, which does not mean that you can make more money from them. It's just more that when I've anecdotally seen people talking about spending $1,000, I say dollars because that's where all the money is, but £1,000, $1,000, to go to a multi-day experience, or even to go to immersive, Bridgerton or Romantasy or whatever it is, people will spend that amount of money. People are very excited about it. It's way more popular in word of mouth than I could imagine. So I think actually the issue is kind of less about cost for some people and more about information and convenience. Every time I tweet about, or I don't tweet, every time I post on Blue Sky or whatever about some expensive new LARP, people are like, that sounds amazing, So that's a trust issue. People see these exciting things, but they don't know whether they're good. Maybe it's AI generated. That's a legacy of the Wonka experience for us. Education, I think this is kind of an interesting area. I mentioned that museums are kind of muscling in on immersive experiences technology, territory. Well, I think that actually, historically, education has always been an important part of tourism and shows. And it might be worth trying to present what you do as being a bit more kind of educational, useful to people. I was at this LARP festival in Finland recently, and we had these long workshops before each of the LARPs. The longest one was 2.5 hours long. And I think a lot of people think that's an absolute drag, and how can we make that shorter? Because I couldn't think of anything worse. They were really interesting. It was a really expert kind of class about how to act, and how to and learning about different cultures. It's actually worth something. So if you can basically find something that you think is bad and reframe it as good, and I don't mean that in a evil way, then I would definitely try considering that. Growing herd competence. It's just people have been to a lot more escape rooms. People have been to a lot more interactive experiences. You don't have to do as much training as you used to. You can ask people. You can ask more of people. Better coverage and documentation. I said I was going to come back to this. I write a newsletter covering games and immersive art, and have become unpopular for saying critical things about people, which I'm not allowed to do today. And I normally write about video games, which you would think people would be more interested in reading about. But the most popular things which have been read tens or hundreds of thousands of times, have been about the Galactic Star Cruiser and Nordic LARP, which no one goes to. Right? People can't go to these things really easily. People can buy games easily, but they don't want to read about that. They want to read about these different things. There is a demand for people to kind of read about this. I went to this thing called Tonight with the Impressionists in Paris, the Musée d'Orsay, which is a VR experience where you sort of go back in time and you're like with, Manet and, I don't know, doing all this stuff. It's pretty uncomfortable, actually. And like, I liked many parts of it, but like, this is just like a blog post. And like, if you search for this thing now, like my blog post is the second, hit, which doesn't seem right, actually. It doesn't mean it's an amazing blog post. It just means that there's actually no coverage of these experiences. Now, the latest IEN report, highlighted a need for better media coverage. We all have this. Everyone has actually complains about this to me, where you have journalists reviewing your work who doesn't like immersive experiences. Like a film journalist who like reviews a horror movie but doesn't like horror movies. Like, we hate that. So we can all, castigate The Guardian about that. But they're not going to hire like immersive experience people. It's just not, like, it's pointless. They're not going to do that. They don't have any money. So the mainstream press is not really going to be the solution here. The way to get better coverage that is not just, influencers, but also not like academic papers that are like intended for a different audience, I'll say that charitably, is trying to kind of foster like a more balanced criticism. And I don't mean that as a way of trying to get more people through the door. It's a way of people learning from each other. Like, it's really expensive for all of you to go to each other's shows. It's very difficult. Like, the best way of doing that would be to go and read about it or see a video, and we just don't really have enough of that. Of course, the LARPers do it better. This mega blockbuster Battlestar Galactica themed LARP was incredibly transparent about like how much everything cost, how many hours they put in, what was required. They put out these books every year, which are free. They're just PDFs, just about like design. And like, I've learned so much from those. We do need better promotion to media, though. I will say that. And I think that that's kind of like changing on its own. There was this new Broadway play out this summer called Job, about online content moderation. It's an 80-minute play, a thriller. Got quite a lot of coverage. And the playwright, Maxwell Friedrich, he started out as a LARPer, and he's still LARPing. And like during interviews, they'd ask him about the play, and all he would talk about is LARPing, which is just like crazy. And he says like, LARPing is a highest form of theater. And all of that is to say, I think the young people are much more forthright about their work as art and having a continuity with earlier forms of art. Like, they're not really embarrassed about what they're doing. They don't see it as kind of just like a sort of commercial thing. And I think if you want people to take it more seriously, even as a commercial thing, that it really does help to sort of take yourself seriously and take what we do seriously as artists. And that makes critics take notice. And maybe getting a Guardian article doesn't really get people through the door, but it has all these kind of knock-on effects in terms of government funding. I want to end with this company that none of you have heard of. I certainly hadn't heard of them. It's a theater company in Japan, in Tokyo, called Dazzle. It was founded in 1996, and they're a street dance company. And for about 20 years, they didn't do anything to do with immersive things whatsoever. And in 2015 or 2016, they saw Sleep No More in New York, and it blew their minds, as it does for a lot of people. So they started doing immersive theater from 2017. And from 2017 to now, so that's 7 years, during COVID, they put on 20 shows, which is wild. It's not a big company. All sorts of work, different sizes, levels of interactivity, mostly non-IP. Sounds horrible. Mostly like just news stories, but sometimes they did work with Netflix or other companies. I visited their studio. They've got a new show coming out called Anemoya. It's their first non-verbal show, so there's no lines. It's aimed directly at an international audience. The location is very compact. It's 5,000 square feet, so much smaller than a lot of immersive experiences out there. And the venue is just a few minutes walk from Tokyo Station, which is just like, enough to sort of like make you cry when you think about whether you could get a space like that near, King's Cross or maybe London Bridge if we went back 20 years. They have a fan club to pre-sell tickets to their audiences. So this is what you get if you've been in business for 30 years. You just have a fan club, and you can go and sell them tickets to your new thing, and you can de-risk challenging work. Some fans have gone to their things, hundreds of times. For their new thing, they're working with media artists and actually using kind of existing works of art. So if you go to their show, it's a weird cross between like a lo-fi punch drunk and like a cool art gallery. And they came up with the story, and then they looked for artists to work with. And they kind of integrated the existing works of art and sculpture and kind of like 3D art into the thing. And that's kind of interesting because it sort of like means it sort of, again, de-risks the production. It also gets them like more attention from different areas, from different areas of the art world. And I mention this company not because they're like on the verge of taking over the world. You probably won't like hear about them after the show. It's more about their kind of longevity and their kind of willingness to use technology, but not be defined by it. They're the company that's experimenting with AI right now, but they're not going to abandon, their actors and their dancers because they are, in fact, the people who are acting. That's who the founders are. The final thing before I open for questions. Like I mentioned, I've been interviewing leaders and founders around the world. When I first started planning this talk, I began asking people about trends, because that makes my life easier, writing. And here's what Team Lab had to say. They said, we don't follow trends. Maybe the design part, yes, like most people are speaking English now, but the creativity part, we don't follow any trends. We don't know how to do that. So I think you do need to follow trends in design. It is interesting to know what is going on, but the creativity is still up to you. Thank you.
Hello, Adrian. First of all, fantastic talk. So interesting to have this incredible overview of what's going on in so many around the world and different parts of the industry. It's been really interesting today, actually, being from the sort of scrappy fringe end of things, seeing what's going on in the kind of big commercial end of the sector. I'd just be interested to hear if you had any insights or views on where things are going for, let's say, the less pecunious end of the scene, the fringe and the emergent and that end of things.
I mean, I find it really like exciting, I guess, what's happening at the sort of more grassroots level. When I started researching the book, I'd never been to a LARP, but I'd never really like seen what was happening there, and it's just interesting. If you've never been to LARP, you absolutely need to go and research this stuff, because some of the stuff is like incredibly high tech and like really high touch and like more sophisticated than like really some of the best stuff out there. And some of the stuff is just like really weird and like it's just people wearing black t-shirts. I think a good way to see the future of the grassroots is just looking at what's happening in Scandinavia and the Nordics, because they're sort of like one of the most interesting things I showed was this kind of a Odysseus LARP, which looks like kind of Battlestar Galactica, and it was all done kind of like on volunteer time, and it shows that you can get volunteers to make something that is like as good as the best things out there. Although, as has been pointed out, it kind of consumed the entire LARPing resources and volunteers of like multiple countries for 6 months. So it's like they sort of launched their own rocket and then they got exhausted and they don't want to do another rocket for like 3 years. The other thing, actually, the other area, I think the indie games sector, video game sector, is just so interesting. For me, that's like fascinating. Oh, and I also like forgot to say, like I think one of the most interesting areas in terms of technology and software is just this development of middleware. Cogs, is exhibiting here. I think that's a really good example of just like, look, unless you really want to go and become good at technology, you should go and pay someone else to do it. And if we don't have enough like middleware companies to do that, then we need to go and like fund some or do that, because it's not really sustainable. Everyone trying to like pay half a developer, for 6 months or something. It's not going to work. By the way, people should go and read Katie Naylor's newsletter, Void Space, because it's very good, and they will teach you a lot about what's going on.
Thank you for the talk. Do you have any thoughts about differences between younger or older people? Because you were speaking about old video games, for example.
Yeah.
And I was born in the age when we had no computer, no mobile phone, then the first video games like UFO or whatever.
Yeah.
And people that are now growing into this world, like, I don't know, they are now 10 or...
So the way I would divide it is less about like age, old versus young, and more about new versus existing players. I think if you're like someone who's not played like video games before, whether you're like 18 or 10 or 60, then the sort of games that you'll fall into are different from the games that people have been playing for like 30 years. Like, if I play a game now, it'll be like Civilization 7 or something, It'll be like just some like sequel to some game that I played forever. But if you're like getting into games now, it'll be something like Fortnite or Roblox, right? Because that's what's being advertised to you. That's what's free to download. That's what your friends are playing. That's what you're hearing about. And I mean, Roblox, I don't know enough about it as I should do, but what is interesting about those games is that, visually they look terrible, but from a kind of creativity point of view, they give users and creators much more agency. Roblox is obviously better understood as a platform where like anyone can go and create their own games, and so all of that is to say, I think that I wouldn't want to go and say, as soon as you hit 40, you just become a different kind of like gamer. It's more just how long have you been playing games and who are your friends. I think that probably goes the same for people going to immersive experiences. I was talking to some people who went to the Mannequins, this new like one-on-one immersive theater show. And like, if you've been to immersive theater, you can only think about it in terms of immersive theater. But if you've not been to immersive theater, it's just a completely different experience. And so that's probably a good way of like looking at things. And that is an issue about people's understanding of the genre. That's a nice thing about being in a new area, that people don't have expectations, or they've got like the expectations less set, but it also means that people kind of get confused.
Hi, I'm curious your thoughts on entertainment like plazas or theme parks where there are kind of competing experiences. For example, Omega Mart is in Area 15 where there's other things to do.
Yeah.
I'm curious just your thoughts on like theme parks and the type of experiences that are in there, because they're kind of bite-sized. I just want you to talk about that.
I mean, Area 15 is kind of interesting. This is like a massive like warehouse complex in Las Vegas where they've got, the main tenant is Meow Wolf, but they've got like VR stuff and other like quote-unquote immersive things. And like from what I can tell, like 95% of people go to Meow Wolf, and like people just go, not really other people go to the other things. And from what, I think Area 15 is like scaled back its expansion plans. So I don't know like how well that is going as a strategy of let's go and build like a massive warehouse and have like 15 different like unconnected experiences. That's kind of more classically like your Coney Islands and your sort of amusement parks in the past, and it seems like the direction is going for more kind of like cohesively themed environments. I don't know whether Area 15 has done a great job in like marketing it, and yeah, Meow Wolf is just like, it's just too dominant in that space. I mean, what would happen? Probably a sort of better example would be like within Meow Wolf, which is a sort of like somewhat coherent like fictional universe. I was like amazed like how interactive that experience was. Like, you go to a lot of these like immersive experiences, and they've got computers there, and I was expecting to be able to like tap on like 3 things, and that was it. It's like an entire alternate reality game on each computer. It's like absolutely unbelievable, like how deep the experience was. They told me well, maybe, yeah. Well, so maybe you can talk to me afterwards about that. But like, you know, it's a very deep and probably too dense an experience. All of that is to say, I think maybe what works better is if you have a kind of overarching narrative and universe, and then you can, if you figure out some sort of like multiversal nonsense storyline that they have, you can sort of have very different sort of experiences. I mean, you know, Sarah talked today about Galaxy's Edge. You know, you have this sort of like this Star Wars environment in Disney, and you know, you can have a lightsaber, you know, workshop there. You can have amazing dark ride. You can have an arcade game that is, you know, Millennium Falcon. You can have all these different things there. Phantom Peak does this, you know, as well. So it's just, I think that's what it looks like more.
Hello, Adrian. Thank you very much for your amazing research. I was wondering, did any of the people that you talked to, did they have, you might not be able to answer this, but is anybody transferring their creative immersive skills into training and immersive training?
Yeah, well, I mean, you know, there's one aspect of it which is like team building. You know, we all know about like companies going to like escape rooms and things like that. I don't know. I mean, Disney Imagineering has done like, you know, they've worked on like training, you know, and simulations for companies in the past and worked for museums. Maybe not like super recently, but that's something that's happened. I mean, my company used to do like training and workshops. I think companies don't really talk about it that much. I don't love it, like, you know, as a sort of business angle, like, but it probably makes sense for smaller companies, you know, like doing workshops and things like that, and kind of smaller experiences. It's just one of these like very labor-intensive things that maybe doesn't scale very well. But if you like doing it, then you should, because, you know, it's a good way of like making money. And I think increasingly, you know, people always talk about like how they want kind of more human contact, and this is like one way of doing it. You know, if you have those skills, it's done. Great, thank you so much.